Lately, this company has been sending us various types of swords that they make for us to review. They do forge all of these swords by hand, and their price is really what makes them attractive. At the time of them sending this sword to us, I was seeing this sword go for about $265 on their eBay store, which is a pretty good price for a forged cutting blade, but I've never reviewed any of their sabers before. In fact, the only other saber we have in hand is a winless 1796 that we are still reviewing. I want to be very transparent that they did send this for free. It doesn't matter though, because I don't want to make a habit of giving praise to sword manufacturers when they don't do something right, because they won't improve that product. But let's take a look at this saber. This is their model 1026, and I would call this a hybrid, an anachronistic mix of different sabers in one sword. We'll get to that in just a bit when we do some close-ups of this sword, but how does it feel in the hands right off the bat? Pretty good. I am feeling a little bit of tip heaviness, and that's most likely due to this right here. This is called a Yeoman, and it is kind of a widened out, spatulated portion of the blade. It did not come sharp on the back. I actually would have really liked it if it was sharp on the back as well, but it's not. It does add weight to the end of the blade, which makes this saber choppier than maybe some of the lighter sabers that are out there. I wouldn't say that this is heavy cavalry saber weight. I would say maybe light cavalry saber weight. A lot of other swords, such as the famous 1796 heavy cavalry, or light cavalry saber, I'm sorry. This feels very on par with that. It's very sweepy, so it's not going to be like a duelist type of blade where I'm gonna be wanting light. Actually, you know what? I take it back. It's still really lively in the hand. Maybe not as lively as a much thinner blade profile, maybe like an 1821, but it feels medium. It's like a medium cutting blade. And I will say that that's most likely gonna make this cut through some of the harder targets like bamboo. I bet you this is gonna kind of cleave through those pretty easily. The grip is rather comfortable. I feel like I can do a lot of the saber techniques I know, and even some of the Scottish broadsword techniques that I know would work very well. Yeah, that's pretty good. You get a lot of sword wind because of that fuller. Can you hear that whistle? That's neat. Yeah, with good edge alignment, you're gonna get that sword wind, that whistle. The guard has a little bit of rattle, but it's tight. It's not, I'm actually twisting it rather hard to get that. So the nut right there is holding it on. It's been peened, and that peen might just be a little loose. It doesn't look like there's anything locking or anything that's sealing the guard to this. There's usually like a lip around here. I've seen some pictures of maybe their later models that they've made. This might be a prototype, but it had some sort of end cap or something here that was, maybe it's just decorative. Overall, the guard looks a little utilitarian. We'll get to that when we do more of a close-up, but it's comfortable. It's not pinching my hand. I feel like I have a lot of room to put my hand in here, and I could probably even wear a light glove with this, and it would be pretty comfortable. The edge geometry on this looks pretty good, but we won't really know until I bring it over to the table and put some calipers to it. It does look like there is a significant amount of taper to it, and I don't see a secondary bevel, which is very common with Swordier. I love the fact that they use a single edge geometry on their sharpening, and it's polished all the way to the edge. I don't see that kitchen knife angle on there. So great job, Swordier. I want to see how sharp this thing is out of the box, so let's get the trusty paper out and let's see. Whew. Yep, that's pretty good. Let's do it again. That one tore. Yeah, pretty good. Let's do it again. Yeah, that was effortless. That's really, really sharp. Yeah, actually really easy, even though the back edge is not sharp. Now, like many other Chinese replicas, this is made out of 65N manganese steel. Keeps the cost down. It isn't a terrible steel, but it is a spring steel, So it is going to behave a lot like 6150 and other steels that are used in European reproductions. And this does have flex. And it flexes at the right spot. So it's flexing near the end of the blade and not near the, if you want to call it the ricasso or the foible. This is not flexing, which is great. This is flexing, and it just tells me that this is well tempered, and again, it probably has decent taper, but we won't know until we bring it to the table. So why don't we do that now? Let's go. The weight of the saber comes in at 1 pound, 13 ounces, which is pretty light. Let's check that distal taper, shall we? My dead calipers are going to help us, as it always does. We're going to start right near the guard. Okay. That's what we got right now. Then we're going to go to the center of the blade and see if it has thinned out. And we do see space right there. You can see the calipers moving. And there's not much taper from the middle of the blade to the end of the blade. Right, because I'm going to go close it, and it really didn't close that much. So from the center of the blade here all the way to the tip, there isn't a lot of taper, but there is some. I don't know if that's purposefully done to give this sword a more cutting power, but we typically see a little bit more taper in sabers like this. That being said, if this is modeled closer to a heavy cavalry saber in terms of blade profile, that would make a whole lot of sense because you want a whole lot of power near the end of the sword. I've also not handled any historical replicas of these swords, so I don't know if that level of distal taper would be necessary, but I know as a modern consumer and a person who likes to mess with sabers, a little bit more taper would probably go a long way in terms of the feeling of the sword, and I don't think it would take away from the cutting ability of this sword. As I stated before, this saber is an anachronistic hybrid of 2 to 3 different types of sabers put into one sword. It is a mixture of an 1821 style cavalry saber and a Killich style saber, or even just a Polish style saber that features a yeoman at the end of the blade. Starting with the hilt, we have what is known sometimes as a ladder style guard with holes perforated through it and a locking nut at the very back in this flower shape. Let me see if I can get a good close view of that. And it is square peened at the very end. Now there is no back strap going down this hilt. You'll just see that it is the typical Swordier paracord style faux leather wrapping. Very comfortable, but not real leather. The guard itself is nice and light, and it does protect the hands if you were to actually need protection using this type of a sword. But the transition between the hilt and the guard itself is very Spartan. There's not a whole lot going on there, and there's really not a whole lot to show any kind of polishing, but it is a very functional guard. Moving on to where the blade and the guard transition, there really isn't anything transitioning the guard from the blade itself, and I would actually love to see some form of a lip or even a leather washer just to make that transition a little bit smoother. It would also prevent anything dripping down the blade getting into the tang or onto the guard itself. Now, I have seen versions of this saber in videos that Swordier has put out that do show some form of a transition, so this may have already changed, but I just find that transition to be a little abrupt aesthetically. The ladder guard itself is heat treated. You can tell by the coloration. It almost looks like an oil slick, which is kind of cool, but it does look like this is burnt almost, so some form of a finish on this would make this look a little less utilitarian and more finished. I think you would attract a lot more people to purchase a saber like this, maybe with some other decorations besides the holes. If it's possible to add any other embellishments, I think that you could definitely raise the price on this and also attract more buyers. Moving down the blade, this has a deeply curved Killich style blade with a very wide fuller. And what is known as a Yeoman, which is that spatulated, wider end to the blade. It adds weight to the end of the blade to give the blade more cutting authority. And it terminates at a very cool semi-spear point. Now the back edge is not sharpened. I would personally love this sword with a sharpened back edge so I can use a whole different set of cuts. But for now, I will have to settle for an unsharpened back edge. Really attractive looking blade overall, and it feels great. So currently, there really isn't a whole lot of choices when it comes to quality cutting sabers that are reproductions. They're not antiques. There are a few companies that make decent models out there, one of which is LK Chen, another Chinese company that forges blades. He makes amazing reproductions, and I believe he has a reproduction of a 1796 that is good quality, and he has a few other sabers as well that a lot of other people have said are great. I don't have an example of his yet. I'm hoping to review them in the future. Another company that has been established to make good cutting sabers is Windlass Steel Crafts. We actually had a chance to review their 1796 as well. That review is still being put together, but we're going to be releasing it very soon. And I'll just give you a spoiler on that. I really like that saber a lot, and they did a very good job with recreating that. You do have other companies that make battle-ready sabers, such as Cold Steel, but the majority of the sabers that they've made that I've handled, they're very durable, but they feel like clubs. They don't feel like they're lively to me. They don't feel necessarily like swords that I would want to use in combat because of their weight. The vast majority of other sabers that you're going to find on the market are just utter crap. They may be sharp, they may be made out of a spring steel, but they are almost decorative. They are something that you would wear on your belt as a ceremonial sword. They're a wall hanger, and I can name off various companies, but I mean, we have one right here. I believe this is a Universal Swords saber, and I mean, it's made out of some form of carbon steel, and it is definitely sharp, but it just feels terrible. It feels so clunky in the hand. The grip feels not like it's gonna come apart, but it just doesn't feel like a swordsman or somebody who knows anything about swordsmanship made this. It's square, it's uncomfortable. And to be fair, there were historical sabers that were used in combat that felt just like this. Not every saber that was used in warfare felt like a completely polished piece. So I was thrilled when I saw that Swordier was making an affordable, battle-ready, and properly balanced saber for the price that they were putting it under. When you pick these two swords up, the Swordier on my right and this, I think it's Universal Swords on my left, you can feel the difference right away. The Swordier is much livelier in the hand, and this one, while it can cut, it's just kind of sluggish, and it feels like the weight distribution was not really thought through. It's just, this was mostly meant for people to hang on a wall somewhere. Even though I do believe this sword is durable enough that you could cut with it. It's heavy enough that if you hit something with it, especially on horseback, it's going to do some damage. This sword feels like a cutting blade is supposed to. I can tell that the Swordier saber, the 1026 model, is geared towards the modern consumer because it's light, it's fast for what it is, and it's extremely sharp, which is what the modern backyard cutter is going to want. Another point of value that comes with the Swordier saber is the scabbard. So just like every other sword they've sent us, there is a relatively nice scabbard with a wood core that comes with it. And I find that that adds a lot of value to every sword that they've sent us. This saber scabbard is non-historical, at least I've never seen one that looks like this before. It has a faux leather outer casing, and just like the others, it's kind of loose. It's not like expertly put on or anything like that. It has a metal collar and a metal shape, which is cool. And again, it has wood going all the way down. And I love the fact that it's wood and not metal, because the metal scabbards probably would make it more expensive, and two, it's gonna dull your blade up pretty bad. The wood core scabbards keep this thing nice and safe. It's going to keep it from cutting people and cutting yourself. And it also keeps your blade sharp longer than a military style metal scabbard would. Now, if Swordier ever gets into making military reproductions, which I would love to get one if they do, going to a metal cased scabbard with a wood core would be the ideal. So Swordier, if you're listening to me, which I'm sure you are, let's talk, because I'd like to see about getting something like that made. Good, do another one. Yes. There's nothing wrong with the edge at all. I think this was landed out here. So overall, what do I feel about this saber? Do I think that it's worth the money? I do, and here's why. You're getting a very sharp lenticular shaped blade with a single edge geometry for a very low cost, and there aren't that many good quality cutting sabers on the market that aren't antiques. There are a few, but they cost a lot more money. The average cost of a LK Chen saber is well above the $300 mark. It's probably closer to the $400 mark. And anything from Windlass Steel Crafts is probably going to have a secondary bevel on it. That's the experience we've had with most of the sabers so far. And this sword doesn't have any of those issues at all. This sword cut through bottles and bamboo with no problem at all, and there is no edge deformation on it. There is no damage to the blade, no matter what we threw at it. It comes with a scabbard for a very low cost, and it feels decent in the hands. So here's the real question. Is this sword for you? Well, that depends. This sword is not based on a historical design. It is an amalgamation of different saber. It is a hybrid of different saber designs, and that is something that Swordier admitted in the last video that they made on this sword. And if you're looking for something that is more historically inspired, this may not be the sword for you, since it has the cutting capability of a Polish saber or a Killich, but with a British style hilt of an 1821 heavy cavalry saber. While sword maneuverability and feeling are going to be relative, I do find that this saber is very maneuverable. I do think it would benefit with a little bit more taper near the end. It would make the sword move faster, and the Yeoman is still going to keep the authority of that cut very, very strong. Lastly is mostly an aesthetic complaint. I would like to see some form of a transition from the blade to the hilt, maybe a washer or something metal that is formed into the guard, and perhaps in the future something a bit more ornate on the guard itself besides these perforations. I think something some scroll work or something like that would be really, really cool. I know that that might make the price go up, but I really like attractive looking sabers. And I would also be very curious to see if we can get more historically inspired designs, such as maybe an 1821 British light cavalry saber and a 1796 light cavalry saber. I think those would be very cool additions to Swordier's lineup. If you guys want to learn more about saber fighting, we do teach classes every single week on saber and Scottish broadsword, and you can see more about those classes at our website, www.historicalfightingarts.com. If you're into historical combat merch and you want to wear some cool t-shirts, we also sell a few designs as well on the same website. I hope you guys enjoyed our journey into the Swordier 1026 saber design, and I can't wait to try out more designs in the future. But that's all I got for now, guys. Bye.